The shoes were worn through to the sole. 4 miles of dirt road, and blood seeping through the canvas at the heel. The dog had never read a person wrong in 7 years. He looked at the stranger, teeth, body coiled, then suddenly stepped back. Made room. No one teaches a dog to do that. The man set the hammer down. 2 years that gate hadn't opened. 2 years the house had held the footsteps of one person. The woman's hands, cracked, calloused from weeks of outdoor work. Her eyes didn't drop. Her voice flat, like she'd buried the fear somewhere along the road. "I can work, just let me stay." She didn't say what she was running from. Some men are patient. The kind who don't stop because it's inconvenient. The kind who keep looking until they find. And at the end of the road, dust began to rise behind a white truck. Cal Merritt had a system: wake before the sun, coffee black, check the east fence line before breakfast, feed the chickens, start the tractor if the hydraulic line wasn't being difficult again, work until dark, eat something, sleep badly, repeat. It wasn't a good system, but it was his. And after 2 years alone on 80 acres outside Kalispell, Montana, he had stopped asking whether good was the right standard. Functional was enough. Functional kept you moving. Moving kept you from sitting too long with the kind of quiet that starts asking questions you don't have answers for. The farm had belonged to his father. His father had worked this land for 40 years, built the barn himself, kept the fences straight, paid his debts on time, and never asked for more than what the land could give. When he died, the farm went to estate. Cal was deployed. He bought it back remotely, wired 12 years of Navy savings across time zones, signed the paperwork in a tent somewhere that doesn't appear on maps. He wasn't sure exactly why. Some mix of guilt and obligation, and something he couldn't name then and still couldn't name now. He'd moved back at 35. 3 years ago, his father's tools still hanging in the equipment shed exactly where they'd always been. His father's coffee mug still on the second shelf. His father's handwriting still on the edge of the barn door frame, where he'd marked his children's heights every spring. Cal hadn't moved any of it, not because he was sentimental. Because moving things felt like an argument he didn't want to have. With a man who was no longer around to hear it. Deanne had tried to redecorate. She'd had thoughts about the kitchen, about the living room, about the photograph in the hallway. The photograph in the hallway was from their wedding. July 2015, a small outdoor ceremony on a friend's property outside Missoula. Diane in a pale dress, leaning slightly into him, her smile open and uncalculating. The kind of smile that doesn't know yet what it will need to survive. Cal wasn't smiling. He never smiled in photographs. But his eyes were on her with the kind of attention he reserved for things that mattered most to him. He'd been paying attention. That was the thing he kept coming back to, those first months after she left. He had been fully present. He had been entirely in it. He had shown up every single day. He just hadn't understood that showing up without saying anything out loud was like a letter with no address. The meaning was real. Nobody received it. She'd told him, calmly at first, then with more effort in her voice, then with the specific exhaustion of someone who has said the same thing enough times to stop believing it will land. Cal, you can stand right next to someone every day, and they can still feel completely alone. If you never let them hear it. He disagreed. He'd thought presence was its own language. He'd thought working hard and staying reliable and never leaving was a way of saying everything that needed to be said. He understood now that he'd been half right, which is the worst kind of wrong. Because you spend years defending the half that was true. While the half that was wrong does all the damage, Deanne had been gone 2 years. She was in Missoula now. He knew because Kalispell was the kind of valley where people knew things without trying. He didn't follow her life, but it reached him anyway, the way weather reaches you. Without asking permission, he didn't blame her. He'd stopped doing that sometime in the 2nd year. Blame required energy he'd decided to spend elsewhere. The farm still worked. That was something. The east fence still needed attention every spring. The chickens were laying. The equipment shed was organized in a way that would have made his father approve. The hydraulic line on the tractor was being difficult again, but it was always being difficult. That was just its personality. Scout kept him honest. Scout was a German shepherd, 7 years old. His muzzle had gone gray in the last year, mostly around the eyes, which gave him the permanent expression of a man who has heard every excuse and is not impressed by any of them. He'd come back with Cal from a deployment that had no official name and no clean summary, He'd been 11 months old then. A working dog, trained, serious, already past the phase of being a puppy in any meaningful sense. They'd been paired because the unit needed a dog and Cal needed a partner, and sometimes the right two things just find each other at the right time. 7 years. Different countries, different terrain. 3 more deployments, none of them simple. And then the farm, the fence lines, the long Montana mornings, the kind of life that is the exact opposite of everything they'd been trained for and somehow worked anyway. Scout did not bark without reason. He did not approach strangers without assessment. He did not relax until he had decided something was safe. He had tolerated Diane. That was the honest word. He'd allowed her presence, kept his distance, never warmed, never chose her. She'd thought he didn't like her. Cal had told her that Scout liked almost no one this way. She'd taken it personally anyway. Scout's judgment, in Cal's experience, was not wrong. Not once in 7 years had the dog made a call that turned out to be inaccurate. Cal trusted the dog more than he trusted most intelligence reports he'd seen in 12 years of service. This was relevant. This became relevant. On a Tuesday evening at the end of March. The cold that month was the quiet kind, not the cold that bites down hard and announces itself, the kind that settles in and stays, moves across the valley low and patient, carrying the last of winter in its teeth. Cal had been working the east fence line all afternoon. The posts had shifted over winter. Frost does that, gets underneath things, moves them without asking. He was resetting them one by one. Boots pressing into soft ground, hammer coming up, coming down. A rhythm that didn't need thinking. That was the point. His body needed something to do while the rest of him did whatever the rest of him did out here when there was nothing to focus on. The sun was starting to drop. Another 40 minutes of useful light, maybe. Scout went still, not the kind of still that meant a deer at the tree line, not a rabbit in the grass. Different. Both ears came forward and locked. His body dropped a fraction at the shoulders. Not threat posture. Reading posture. The distinction mattered. Cal had learned to read it the way you learn to read weather. Not consciously, just through enough time paying attention. Scout was looking toward the front gate. Cal followed the line of the dog's gaze. Someone was standing at the end of the dirt road. At the gate itself. Not inside. Just outside. Standing the way people stand when they aren't sure they have the right to take the next step. The late afternoon light was flat and orange behind them. From 200 yards, details were difficult. The figure hadn't moved toward the house, hadn't moved away, just waited. Cal set the hammer down on top of the fence post, looked at Scout. Scout looked at him, then back at the gate, not alarmed, not ready, just waiting. "All right," Cal said, to the dog or to himself. Hard to say. He started walking. 200 yards takes longer than you think. When you're not sure what you're walking toward, Cal covered it without hurrying. He'd learned long ago that how you approach something tells the other person everything about what's about to happen. Fast means alarm. Slow and steady means you're in control of yourself, whatever else might be true. Scout walked at his left side, not lunging, not lagging, just there. Details settled as they got closer. A woman, late 20s, maybe. She was wearing a canvas jacket that wasn't quite heavy enough for the temperature. Dark hair pulled back. The wind had done most of the work of undoing it. Strands across her face she hadn't bothered pushing back, trail dust on the jacket. On her jeans from the knee down. The kind of dust that comes from walking unpaved roads for a while. A backpack on one shoulder. A canvas tote bag in the other hand. That was everything she was carrying. Her shoes were running shoes. Not boots. The soles were worn nearly flat at the heel. She watched Scout first. Then she watched Cal. She didn't step back. That was the first thing he registered. Most people, when a German shepherd and a man who looks like Cal walk toward them at that pace across that much empty space, they step back. Instinct. Not a conscious choice. Just the body making a decision. She didn't. Cal stopped about 10 feet from the gate. Scout stopped beside him. The woman's eyes moved from the dog to Cal and stayed there. Dark eyes. Not hard. Not soft. The kind of dark that has learned to show only what it intends to show. Something underneath that was harder to read. Or maybe just heavily guarded. A silence went between them. Long enough to be something, then she spoke. "I can work." Her voice was steady. Not loudly, just clearly. "Whatever you need done. I'm not asking for anything I haven't offered to earn." A pause. "Just let me stay." For a while, the steadiness wasn't the steadiness of someone who isn't afraid. Cal recognized the difference. It was the steadiness of someone who has decided being afraid isn't useful right now, who has taken the fear and set it aside. Not because it isn't real, but because there's no room for it in whatever she's trying to accomplish. He looked at her, then at the road behind her, the long dirt road running back to the county highway 1.5 miles away. Empty, no car, no one else. Where'd you come from? Town, she said. That's 4 miles, I know. He let that sit. Then, almost without deciding to, his eyes moved to her hands. She was holding the backpack strap with her right hand and the canvas tote with her left. The knuckles on her right hand were dry and cracked. The skin at the base of her fingers had calluses that didn't come from a day's work. They came from weeks of it. Outdoor work. The kind done with tools and without gloves, or with gloves that wore through. She'd been working somewhere hard for a while before this. He looked up. She was watching him look. She didn't pull her hands back. Didn't explain them. Just let him see. No hiding what was visible. Cal filed that he had already formed the word no in the back of his throat. Sensible. The right answer for a man alone on a farm who didn't know this person and had complications enough already and no particular reason to add more. The word didn't come out. What's your name? Nora Vane. He reached for the gate latch. The hinges groaned when he pushed it open. They always did, a long complaint of metal that sounded too loud in the afternoon quiet. He held it. Scout stepped back half a step, making room. Not retreating. Just making room. Nora Vane walked through. She didn't say thank you. Didn't exhale with relief or let her face go soft. She stepped through and stopped and looked at the farmhouse and the land around it the way she'd been looking at the gate. Reading it. Measuring it against something internal. Cal pulled the gate shut behind her. The hinges complained again. The three of them stood in the fading light. Wind moved through the dry grass at the edge of the road. Then Cal started walking toward the house. After a moment, she followed. Scout walked between them. The house was clean. Cal had grown up cleaning things and putting them back where they belonged, and 12 years in the Navy had made those habits structural. But there is clean, and there is lived in, and this house was only one of those. A jacket hung over a chair back, one sleeve dragging the floor. Tools laid out on the kitchen table alongside an empty mug and a piece of paper that had been there so long it had become part of the surface. A sealed cardboard box in the corner that no one had opened. Clear counters. Done dishes. Everything exactly where it had been put. By one person who hadn't been thinking about how it looked to anyone else. Because there hadn't been anyone else. Nora stepped inside and set her backpack against the wall, kept the tote bag in hand for a moment, then set that down too. She stood in the middle of the room and looked around, not judging. Reading. The way you learn a space before you speak into it. Her eyes moved from the tools to the jacket to the hallway at the far end. At the end of the hallway, on a small side table, there was a photograph in a wooden frame. From where she stood, she couldn't have made out details, just that it was there. A face or two, a frame. She looked at it for 1 second. Then away, Cal stood in the kitchen doorway. He hadn't invited her to sit, hadn't offered anything. Just watching, the way Scout watched, not hostile. Assembling information. Bathrooms at the end of the hall, he said. Room on the right is storage. The one on the left is empty. She looked at him, understanding what he was offering even though he hadn't named it directly. Thank you, she said, the first time. He nodded. Went to start coffee. He heard her moving. Not rushing, just getting oriented. A door opened and closed. Water ran in the bathroom. When she came back, the dust was gone from her face and she'd fixed her hair properly. She looked younger and more tired at the same time. She appeared in the kitchen doorway. Can I? She gestured toward the cabinets. He said yes. Though he wasn't entirely sure what she was asking, she opened the cabinet and stood there a moment, reading what was in it. Then she started moving with a quiet purpose. Not performing helpfulness, just doing something useful, because she'd said she would. On ions from the basket, by the door, potatoes from the bin under the counter, ground beef from the refrigerator, which she found without asking where it was, a scan of the spice shelf. She took 2 jars without hesitation. She knew what she was doing. Cal moved the tools off the kitchen table and sat down. He watched her. She didn't ask where the cutting board was. Looked in 2 drawers and found it in the second. Didn't comment on the spice shelf or the fact that the largest pan had a handle that wobbled. She worked around what was there. Scout came in from the living room and lay down near the stove, head on his paws, watching her, not tense, not wary, Curious, that was different. The smell of food spread through the kitchen about 20 minutes in. Onions softening in oil first. Then the beef. Then something from one of those spice jars that Cal couldn't have named, but that mixed with the onions and made the kitchen smell like a place where someone actually lived. He hadn't realized how long that smell had been absent. He sat at the table and looked at the grain of the wood near his coffee mug. He'd run his thumb over that spot 100 times. He did it now. He thought about practicality, about what it meant to let a stranger stay in his house, about what he knew and what he didn't. He knew her name. He knew where she said she'd come from. He knew she'd walked 4 miles. He knew her hands showed weeks of outdoor labor. He knew Scout was lying by the stove without his body coiled. That last thing was more information than most people would think to weigh. He thought about what had been missing from the house for 2 years. The smell of food cooking, for one. The sound of another person moving through rooms. Something to pay attention to at the end of the day that wasn't his own thinking. He wasn't romantic about it. He wasn't building a story. He was just noting what was true. They ate across from each other. Scout got a piece of beef from Cal's hand, took it carefully, evaluated it, ate it in one slow, deliberate motion. The food was good. More salt than Cal would have used, but the flavor underneath was real, the kind of cooking that comes from somewhere specific. You don't learn that from a website. You learn it from someone who learned it from someone. They didn't talk during dinner. At some point, Nora set her fork down and looked at the window. She had the particular emptied look of someone who has been running on adrenaline for days and has sat down for the first time in a while, somewhere that isn't moving. When he'd finished, Cal stayed at the table a moment. Not for any reason. Nora started clearing. He carried his mug and the coffee pot to the counter beside her without being asked. He was almost out of the kitchen when she spoke. "The salt," she said, still facing the sink. "I know. My grandmother cooked everything heavy. I picked it up and I forget to undo it." He stopped. "Nebraska grandmother," he said. She turned around. "How'd you know?" "People who cook like they mean it," he said. "Learned it from a woman. And that particular way with onions is a Plains thing. Southern does it differently." She looked at him for a moment. Something shifted slightly in her face. Not a smile, a softening. "She died 6 years ago," Nora said. "She's probably why I'm still functional in a kitchen." A pause. "Among other reasons." He nodded. "Room on the left," he said. "Door sticks. You have to lift the handle." He went upstairs. It was a long time before he slept. 3 days passed. Nobody sat down and made rules. Nobody explained what they expected. Things just found their shape. Nora was up before him every morning. Coffee made. She sat at the table with her own cup and didn't require conversation. Cal stood at the kitchen window and looked at the fields in the early light, and she let him do that without filling the silence. He went to work. She found work. By the second morning, she'd fixed the chicken coop wire he'd been putting off for 3 weeks. He came around the barn at 10 and found her crouched in front of it, pressing the loose section back with a flat rock because she hadn't found the staple gun yet. He looked at the repair. "Done right. Hardware in town has the proper staples," he said. "I'll pick them up when I go. This will hold until then," she said, and went back to what she was doing. He returned to the fence line. By day 3, Scout was spending more time near Nora than near Cal. Not dramatically, quietly. The way the dog made all his decisions. Without announcement, without ceremony. He was in the barn when she was in the barn. Near the garden when she was near the garden. Within 10 feet of wherever she happened to be settled. Present, Cal noticed. He kept it to himself. On the 4th day, Nora cleaned the hallway. Cal came in at noon and found her at the far end, wiping down the side table with a damp cloth, moving carefully around the photograph. She had cleaned the table's surface, the base of the lamp beside it, the window above. The frame she hadn't touched. Cal stopped in the doorway and watched. She finished, wrung out the cloth, stepped back to check the light through the window. Then she looked at the photograph 1 second, 2. Then she moved on. He went to the kitchen, poured a glass of water. A minute later, she came in. "The wooden frame," she said. "The one on the small table. The corner on the right side has a crack. Won't fall apart. But a framing shop could fix it pretty easily if you wanted." She set the cloth on the counter. "It's a good picture," she said, stating a fact, not fishing for anything. Not opening a door she needed to walk through. Just noting something true. Then she went back outside. Cal stood at the counter. He thought about the photograph. about how long since he'd looked at it with any real attention, about Diane's smile in it, about his own eyes in it, about how much he'd believed, standing there that July, that he knew how to build something permanent. He'd known how to build things. He'd been good at the building. He just hadn't known how to let the other person read the blueprints. He looked out the kitchen window. Scout was out there 20 feet from where Nora was turning soil in the vegetable beds. Sitting down. Doing nothing, just present. Cal watched them both for a while, then he went back to work. The evenings took their own shape. Cal sat on the porch after dinner. His father had done the same. There was something about the end of daylight in Flathead Valley that deserved to be watched rather than ignored. The sun dropping behind the Whitefish Range. The sky moving through orange into the particular deep purple that only shows up at altitude when the air is clear. He brought coffee out. Sometimes a book he didn't read. On the fourth evening, Nora came out. She looked at the two chairs. His was obvious. Worn, positioned toward the mountains, the cushion compressed from years of use. The other one had never been used. Or not in recent memory. She took that one. Left a comfortable distance between them. They sat without talking. The quiet was either uncomfortable or natural depending on who was in it. Between them, it was mostly natural. Which surprised Cal slightly. He wasn't usually easy with silence that included another person. The fields below the porch went dark in stages. Nora spoke first. "She's nearby," she said, looking at the fields, not at Cal. "The woman in the photograph. You'd know if she'd moved far." He looked at her. "Missoula," he said. "Moved there about a year back." She nodded. Didn't push, and Cal kept going. He wasn't sure why. Maybe the low light made it easier. Maybe it was that she'd said it plainly. No angle to it. And a plain answer felt like the natural response. "Her name was Diane," he said. "My wife." "Was my wife. She left about 2 years ago." He paused. There was someone else, the fields. The dark coming in from the east, did you see it coming? Cal thought about it. Actually thought, instead of reaching for the easy answer. "I saw something," he said. "I didn't want to name it." If you don't name a thing, you can keep not dealing with it a while longer. That works until it doesn't. Nora turned her mug in her hands. "The part that doesn't go away," Cal said after a moment. "It's not the leaving. Not even the other person. It's that I had no idea. I was the last one to know because I wasn't looking. Because I trusted her completely." He stopped. "That's what complete trust looks like when it breaks. You're the last one to find out. Because you weren't watching. Because you trusted." "That wasn't a mistake," Nora said. He looked at her. "People talk about trust like it's something you do carefully," she said. Her voice was quieter now. "Keep your options open. Stay a little guarded. Trust but verify." She shook her head slightly. "That's not trust. That's a contract. Real trust is choosing to believe someone when you can't actually prove anything. And it will always leave you exposed. That's not the downside. That's the definition. A pause. When it breaks, the breaking says something about them. Not about you." Cal sat with that. The sky had gone fully dark. Stars appearing in the west first, then spreading east. Montana stars, which are different from other stars. More of them, and they seem closer, and they make the world feel very large, and also very specific at the same time. After a while, he looked over. "How long have you been running?" She didn't pretend not to understand. "About 3 weeks from Billings," she said. "I told you where, not what from." A silence. "His name is Grant Paley," she said finally. "I did bookkeeping for his construction company. 3 years." She turned her mug slowly in both hands. "He was good to me at first. The way some people are good to you right up until they understand they don't need to be anymore." A pause. "The apartment I lived in was in a building he owned. My car was kept at his business address. My phone plan was on his account. The bookkeeping system I managed. I was the only other person with access to the full accounts. Which meant I was tied to him professionally." She said it evenly. Like reading from a document she'd read so many times the words had lost most of their heat. "When I tried to leave the first time, he didn't stop me. Didn't argue, didn't threaten. He just said okay." She looked at the dark fields. 2 weeks later, I was back. I didn't have an apartment. My car insurance had lapsed because the renewal had gone to his address and I didn't know. My references at work were all people in his orbit. She stopped. He smiled when I came back. He said, "See, you need me." A longer pause. The worst part was that I stayed for another 6 months believing some version of it. Not the whole thing. But enough. Enough that I kept telling myself the situation was complicated. Not that the person was. She looked up at the stars. It took me a long time to understand those are different problems with different answers. Cal said nothing. He let it be what it was. Second time I left, she said. I did it right. Took what I could carry. Didn't tell anyone where I was going, 'cause I didn't know where I was going. I've been moving since. Stayed with someone I knew outside Missoula for a week. Picked up work on a property near Big Fork after that. She glanced at her hands. That's what the hands are from. He nodded slowly. Grant knows the general direction, she said. Her voice steady. Factual. He's patient. He's not the kind of person who stops because it's inconvenient. He'll look until he finds something. Cal looked out at the gate at the end of the road. Closed. The way it was supposed to be. I know, he said. She turned to look at him. You knew that when you opened the gate. I had a feeling, he said, and I opened it anyway. He turned his coffee mug in his hands. Scout didn't warn me off you, he said. He's warned me off plenty. Nora looked at the dog, stretched out at the top of the porch steps, eyes half closed, head on his paws. You trust the dog's judgment. More than most, Cal said. A quiet settled between them. The kind that happens when two people have said the real things and don't need to cover it with more words. Does it change things? She asked. Meaning, knowing someone might come looking. Cal looked at the gate. Not tonight, he said. He stood, picked up his mug, went inside that night. For the first time in months, he went to the front door and checked the lock. Not the quick habit check. Deliberate. The deadbolt, the chain, the handle, then the back door. The kitchen window latches. He stood in the downstairs hall, he thought. I don't know this woman, he thought. 3 days is nothing, he thought. Scout lay down by the stove, he thought. The house smells like food again. He went to bed. He didn't analyze it further. Analysis was for problems you were still deciding about. Some things just needed acknowledging. And then, before any of that could settle into something he'd have to name, he picked up his phone, typed a message to Holt Reardon, former teammate, Seattle now. Private investigations need a background check. Grant Paley, Billings MT, owns a construction company mid-sized, not urgent yet. I want to understand what I'm dealing with before it becomes urgent. Someone I know left his orbit 3 weeks ago. He's the kind of person who looks right it back once, sent it, placed the phone face down on the table. Scout came in from the living room and lay down near the kitchen doorway. Halfway between the table and the back hall. Positioned the way he positioned himself when he decided something needed watching over. Cal looked at the dog. The dog looked at him. Outside, the April dark was coming down over the valley. Clean and cold. The gate at the end of the dirt road closed. The house warm. Upstairs, he heard Nora moving through the empty room on the left, the floor settling under her weight. The sound of a window being checked. Small sounds. Real sounds. The sounds of someone making themselves at home in the only way she probably allowed herself. Carefully, quietly, one small action at a time. Cal left his hand on the phone, he thought. Some things carry for too long, he thought. I'm not going to be that. He didn't say it out loud. He rarely said things out loud, but he thought it clearly. And thinking it clearly in this house on this night, with that gate closed and Scout at the doorway and the smell of dinner still in the walls, that was a start. That was enough for tonight. That was enough. April came in without announcement. That's how it always worked in Flathead Valley. Not a dramatic arrival. Not a single warm morning that declared itself the beginning of something new. Just a slow, incremental loosening. The snow line retreating uphill by degrees. The ground softening in patches. The light changing before the temperature did. So that you'd wake up one morning and the sky had a different quality to it. Something less compressed. Something that reminded you winter had never been permanent. Even when it felt that way, Cal had watched 12 Montana Aprils on this land, counting his childhood more. He knew the pattern the way he knew the hydraulic line on the tractor. Not because he'd studied it, but because he'd dealt with it enough times to stop being surprised. What he hadn't expected was how different this one felt, not the weather. The weather was the same. The farm was different. It took him a few days to understand exactly what had shifted. He kept noticing things without being able to name the overall change. The chicken coop wire, tight now, properly stapled. The cold frame behind the barn, he'd been planning to rebuild that for 2 seasons. Suddenly standing again, new boards cut clean, hinges replaced, the angle corrected so the lid would actually seal. The vegetable beds behind the house, which had been fallow for 2 full-growing seasons, beginning to show the dark color of turned and composted soil. Nora had done all of this without being asked, without being thanked, mostly, without being directed. She'd looked at what needed doing and done it, the way someone does when they understand a place well enough to read what it's asking for. Not every farm was the same. Some people couldn't read that. They'd ask what to do and wait for instructions. Nora looked at the land the way Cal looked at it, like a living thing with its own logic, and she responded to that logic instead of waiting for someone to translate it. One morning, he found a list on the kitchen table. 2 columns. Left column, materials available on the property. Right column, materials needed from town, with quantities and the reasoning for each. Clean thinking, nothing wasted, no unnecessary items. The logic of each entry was clear without being explained. Cal drove to town the next morning and bought everything in the right column. When he got back, she was already outside working. He left the bags by the garden. She picked up the first one without looking up and kept moving. That was the kind of arrangement they had. Then came the morning that changed something without either of them knowing it was happening. A Tuesday. Nothing special about it. The sky was the pale washed-out gray of early April. A frost on the north-facing slope of the barn roof. Cal was at the equipment shed, working on the tractor's hydraulic line. He'd been underneath it for 40 minutes. He heard the back door open, Nora, coming out for the morning. Scout had been lying in the shed doorway. In the patch of early light where the warmth would come first, the dog stood up, not alert, not tense. Just stood up, the way Scout stood when Cal stood, the way a partner moves when the person beside them moves. Automatic, considered, definite, and walked with her across the yard. Sat down when she reached the garden bed and started working. Settled his weight, head up. Eyes half on the property line, half on her, not requiring anything, not performing, just present. Cal set down the wrench. He stood in the shed doorway, 7 years. He had lived with this dog for 7 years. He had watched Scout size up every person who came onto this property. Neighbors, delivery drivers, the vet, contractors. All of them received Scout's professional courtesy. Correct, distant, never comfortable. He had tolerated Diane. That was the honest word. Allowed her presence, kept his distance, never chosen her. But this, what Scout was doing right now. Following Nora to the garden and sitting beside her like he'd always done it, like it was simply the place he was supposed to be. This was different. This was a decision. And Scout's decisions about people, in 7 years of watching, were not made lightly. And were not wrong. Cal looked at Nora working in the garden. Scout steady beside her. He thought about the list she'd left on the kitchen table. The chicken coop wire held with a flat rock, the way she'd looked at the photograph in the hallway and said it's a good picture and left it exactly at that. About the walk. 4 miles. Worn-through shoes. An offer instead of a plea. Something settled in his chest. Not romance. He wasn't a man who moved toward romance quickly or carelessly. Not obligation. Something more like recognition. The feeling of a piece of information that has been moving around the edge of your understanding, finally finding the place it fits. He picked up the wrench. He went back to work. That same evening, Nora found the box. She'd been working through the storage room off the kitchen, the one that had been closed since Cal moved back in. Full of his father's things, a few items belonging to Diane that she hadn't collected. Sealed cardboard boxes Cal had placed there on arrival and not opened since. Nora had asked before she started. Cal had said go ahead. She came into the kitchen while he was at the counter, brought it in both hands, set it carefully on the table. Do you know what this is? Small wooden box, dark with age. Lid had a simple clasp. His father's handwriting on the top, not a label, just a date. August 1987, pressed into the wood with a pen that had been pressed firmly, like the writing was meant to stay. Cal sat down. He opened the clasp inside, a photograph and a letter, the photograph first, his parents. Young. On a road trip from the look of it, the dashboard of a car he didn't recognize, summer light. His father driving with one hand, his head turned toward his mother. Not toward the road. Toward her. His mother with her arm out the window, head tilted back slightly, laughing at something. The picture caught them between moments. Neither of them performing, both of them in it completely. He had never seen this photograph before. He set it down carefully. The letter was folded small, 3 folds across. The paper had gone soft with age, the color of old cream. He unfolded it. His father's handwriting, The careful, precise print of a man who'd grown up when handwriting was still taught like it mattered. He read the first paragraph, then stopped. He folded it back, slowly, set it back in the box. Nora was watching him from the doorway. She hadn't moved. "They look happy," she said. "They were," he said. Most of the time, she looked at the box on the table, not pushing, just present. "Your father wrote like someone who thought about things for a long time before he said them," she said. Cal looked at the folded letter, at the date on the box lid. August 1987. He would have been 9 years old. "That's where I get it from," he said. She was quiet for a moment. "Did he send it eventually?" "I don't know," Cal said. "I didn't know about it until just now." She looked at the box, then at him. Something careful in her face. "Maybe that's why he kept it," she said, "because he hadn't sent it. Because it still needed saying." She went back to the storage room. Cal sat at the kitchen table for a long time, his hand on the box. The photograph of his parents beside it, his father looking at his mother instead of the road. Both of them in it completely. His father had loved his mother that way, fully, deeply, and had written it down carefully in words that were precise and real, and had never sent it. Cal thought about that, about what it costs to carry something perfectly expressed and never let the other person hear it. About what Diane had told him. About the difference between a feeling that exists and a feeling that reaches someone. He thought about Nora in the garden. Scout beside her like he'd always known that was where he was supposed to be. He thought about the gate. 8. The hinges groaning, the way she'd stepped through and looked at the farm the way you look at something you're deciding whether to trust. He was not going to be his father in this particular way. He didn't say that out loud. But he understood it, sitting there, with the old photograph and the unread letter and the April dark outside the window. That was the beginning of something he didn't have a name for yet. Holt's message came at 6:47 on a Wednesday morning, 3 weeks after Cal had sent the request, 4 pages. Scanned a document. Cal read through it once, set his phone down, poured a second coffee he didn't touch, read it again. Grant Paley, 39 years old, owner and sole proprietor of Paley Construction LLC, registered in Billings, Montana, 2013. Small commercial and residential contractor, 11 employees, business record, clean, no contractor licensing violations, no OSHA citations. Financial history indicating a stable and growing operation. Then the other part, a civil harassment complaint filed in 2021 by a former female employee. Docketed, then withdrawn following out-of-court settlement. Settlement terms sealed under a confidentiality agreement, 2 separate contacts with Billings Police Department in 2022, both involving women, both categorized as domestic disputes. No arrests, no charges filed. Cases closed. At the bottom, a note in Holt's handwriting, scanned. Holt always added handwritten notes. He said it was harder to attribute than typed text and harder to subpoena. The note read, "This guy has studied where the line is. He never crosses it. His attorney makes accusers look unstable. Pattern exists, but there's nothing actionable yet. Don't give him any material to work the same way on your person. Be careful how you move on this. Smart careful, not reactive careful." Cal stared at the last line for a while. Not reactive careful. Right. He called Vera Stills that afternoon. Vera was a lawyer in Kalispell. He'd worked with her 3 years ago when he bought back the farm. Title work, estate complications, the kind of legal territory that requires someone who knows the county and knows how to read people as well as documents. She was 62. Short white hair. The unhurried precision of someone who had stopped needing to perform competence because she actually had it. She answered on the second ring. Cal gave her the basics. The situation. Holt's file. What Nora had told him on the porch. Vera listened without interrupting. When he finished, there was a brief silence that wasn't uncertainty. It was assessment. If she wants to build a wall, Vera said, now is when to build it. Before he makes contact, not after. She hasn't decided she wants that yet. She should think about it. The best time to establish a legal record is before someone tries to create their own version of events. A pause. Is she safe right now? Yes. Good. Let me know when she's ready to talk. My door's open. Cal hung up. He didn't tell Nora about the file. Not yet. He sat with that decision. Turned it over. Checked it from different angles the way he'd been trained to check plans before executing them. He wasn't hiding it to protect himself. He was holding it because putting fear into someone's life before you could do anything useful with that fear wasn't kindness. It was just offloading weight. He needed to understand what he was dealing with first. Then he could bring her in fully. Scout was watching him from across the kitchen. The dog had a way of doing that, watching Cal think through things. Patient and still, the way of very serious person. I know, Cal said. Scout put his head down. Birch Calder showed up 3 days later, on a Thursday morning. Cal had known Birch for 3 years. Not well. The way you know a neighbor when both of you are the kind of men who mostly work and don't make a project out of socializing. Birch ran the property to the north. 68 years old. Retired from 30 years working for the county road department, and then, when retirement turned out to be something he couldn't figure out how to do, came back to his family's land and started farming it seriously. His wife Bev had died 4 years ago. Cal had seen the obituary in the Kalispell paper, dropped a meal off at the property a week after. Birch had thanked him at the door with the careful formality of a man holding himself together with both hands. Cal had understood that. He hadn't pushed for anything more. Birch had planted the same vegetable garden every year since Bev died. Same layout, same crops, same spacing. As if changing anything would be a kind of erasure. That Thursday morning, Birch drove his old pickup along the fence line that separated their properties. Stopped, got out without explanation, looked at Nora's garden beds over the wire for a long, silent moment. Nora looked up. Birch took a paper bag from the cab of his truck. Set it on the fence post. Heirloom tomato seeds, he said. Bev's variety. I save them every year. He looked at the garden beds, at the composted soil, the careful spacing, the marigold seedlings along the south edge. Never found the right place to give them. Nora stood up slowly, pulled off one glove, looked at the bag. My grandmother grew marigolds along the south edge too, she said. Birch looked at her for a moment. Something in his face that wasn't quite a smile. More like recognition. Nebraska? Nebraska, she said. He nodded. Got back in his truck. Drove back along the fence line without looking back. Nora picked up the bag. Held it in both hands for a moment. Then she looked at Cal, who had come around the barn and was standing 20 feet away. He hadn't announced himself. Hadn't needed to. She didn't say anything. Neither did he. But something had happened. The valley was letting her in. Not through a ceremony. Not through anyone making a decision about it. Just through the quiet accumulation of small recognitions. The kind that take time. The kind you can't rush. Cal went back to the barn. Grant Paley came on a Wednesday morning in late April, and Cal was near the equipment shed when he heard tires on the dirt road. Not fast. The deliberate pace of someone who was looking at things as they passed. Not rushing to arrive white pickup truck. New. The kind of vehicle that communicated success without being loud about it. Which was itself a kind of loudness. It stopped outside the gate. The engine idled for a moment, then shut off. The man who got out was 39 years old and built to read as younger. Not through vanity alone, through maintenance. The careful maintenance of a man who understood that appearance was a professional tool. Khaki pants. Flannel shirt that wasn't cheap. Moving with the unhurried ease of someone who expected the space around him to wait. He didn't open the gate. He stood outside it and looked at the property the way you look at something you're evaluating. Nora was in the garden. She looked up, went still, not the stillness of surprise. The stillness of recognition. Scout, who had been lying in the shade near the garden beds, got to his feet. He did not move toward the gate. He moved to Nora, stood beside her, close. Cal came around from the equipment shed at a steady pace, hands loose at his sides, face neutral, the same controlled approach he'd used the evening Nora arrived. Slow and deliberate, because how you approach something tells the other person what you're carrying. He reached the gate from inside. The two men looked at each other through the bars. Grant Paley smiled. Easy. Practiced. The smile arrived slightly before the rest of his face caught up with it, which was a tell. A small one. But Cal caught it. Nice property, Grant said. Thank you. I'm looking for someone. A woman named Nora Vane. I have reason to think she might be in this area. What's your business with her? Grant's expression shifted into something that managed to be both concerned and reasonable at the same time. The expression of a man who had rehearsed this. Personal, he said. She was living in a property I own in Billings, left without notice. There's also some business bookkeeping she'd been managing. I can't close my year-end accounts without her completing it. It's more of an inconvenience than anything else. I just want to talk. Cal looked at him. Let the silence sit for a moment. I don't know anyone by that name. Grant's eyes did something specific then. Quick, controlled, but there. A scan, to the garden, to Scout, to the house, and then to Nora standing 20 feet behind Cal. He saw her. He'd seen her from the moment he got out of the truck. He'd probably seen her from the road. He didn't call it out. That was interesting. I'd hate for there to be any misunderstanding, Grant said. Still pleasant, still reasonable. The lease situation is straightforward, a civil matter. I'm not here to cause problems for anyone. I understand, Cal said, and I don't know anyone by that name. So you've got the wrong place. A pause. Grant's eyes moved to the garden again. To Nora, still standing there, not hiding, not moving. She hadn't moved back toward the house. Hadn't looked away, she was standing in her garden, 10 feet behind Cal, looking at Grant Paley with the steady, unreadable expression of someone who has already decided what they're not going to do, Cal noticed, filed it. All right, Grant said. He took a business card from his shirt pocket and held it over the gate. If you happen to run across her, I'd appreciate a call. No trouble in it for her. Just some paperwork. Cal took the card. Grant held his gaze for a moment, trying to read something. Not finding it. Nice dog, he said. He is, Cal said. Grant walked back to his truck, got in, took his time with the turn. Drove back down the dirt road at the same deliberate pace he'd arrived at, giving himself a long last look at the property through the side window. Cal stood at the gate until the truck was out of sight. He dropped the card in the dirt, then he turned. Nora was still in the garden, still standing where she'd been. Her gloves were in her hands now, not on them. She'd pulled them off without knowing she was doing it. Scout was still beside her. Cal walked over. He's been asking around, she said. Her voice was level, not quite steady. He doesn't drive this far for one door. No, Cal said. He's been working the area. She looked at the road where the truck had been, empty now, ordinary. He won't stop, she said. I told you. I know, what do we do? We start building a wall, Cal said. Before he makes the first move officially. I know a lawyer in town. I've already talked to her. She's ready when you are. Nora looked at him. Stillness. You talked to a lawyer, she said. Already a few weeks ago. After I got the background report. What report? So he told her. Holt Reardon, the 4 pages. The civil complaint in 2021. The 2 police contacts in 2022. The pattern that existed below the threshold of anything actionable. The note at the bottom in Holt's handwriting. Nora listened without showing much on her face. But her jaw set in a specific way that said she was taking it in against something she'd already known and was now hearing confirmed. He'll say those women were unstable, she said. He always says that. I know. That's why we need the record to start now, before he gets to write the first version of events. A pause. Your side of this is clean, Nora. No record. You left a lease early, that's a civil issue, and not a strong one, given what you've described. You have 3 years of his financial records because you processed them. That's leverage he doesn't expect you to have. She held her gloves, rolled them once in her hands. Never talked to a lawyer, she said. About this, Vera stills, Cal said. She's not hard to talk to. I'll drive you. You can say as much or as little as you want. The first time, Nora looked at him for a long moment. All right, she said. She turned back to the garden. Put her gloves back on. I'm going to finish this bed. She said, okay. He went back to the equipment shed. He didn't look back at her, but he listened, her footsteps returning to the soil, the quiet sound of the trowel, the rhythm of someone who is choosing to continue what they were doing because continuing is its own kind of statement. She had just come face to face with the person she'd been running from. And she had not run. She'd stood in her garden, 10 feet behind him, and not flinched. Cal picked up his wrench. He went back to work. The notebook was on the kitchen table. He'd left it there by accident, not something he would have done if he'd been thinking. A regular spiral notebook, the kind he used for farm records, crop rotations, equipment maintenance logs, the order history for parts he needed to reorder, but this one had pages near the back that weren't about the farm, 3 pages about Grant Paley. Holt's information transcribed in Cal's own handwriting, Vera Still's number, notes from the phone call with her, specific details of what Nora had told him on the porch. The apartment, the car registration, the phone account, the first attempt to leave, the second. He'd titled that section with her initials, NV. He found the notebook on the table when he came in for lunch. Nora was standing at the counter, her back to him. She didn't move when he came in. He understood immediately. He set his gloves on the counter, washed his hands at the sink. How long? She said. Not a question. A statement waiting to be completed from the second week. Silence. She turned around. Her face was not angry. Not quite. Something more complicated than anger. Something that was working through layers. You wrote down what I told you, she said. On the porch. Yes, why? Because I didn't want to get the details wrong when I talked to Holt. When I talked to Vera. He turned off the tap, dried his hands, turned to face her. I should have told you. That was wrong. She looked at the notebook on the table. Then at him. When I found it, she said slowly. My first reaction. She started again. In 3 years with Grant, she said. He gathered information about me constantly. It was part of how it worked. He knew things I hadn't told him directly, things he'd found, things he'd noted, and he used them to make me feel seen when he wanted me to feel seen. Exposed when he wanted me to feel exposed. Her jaw set. When I saw that notebook, my first reaction was, I understand, Cal said. No, let me finish. He waited. My first reactions was that this was the same thing, she said. That I'd done it again. Walked into the same room with different walls. A breath. And then I read it. And I read it again. And I looked at what was in it. And it's just the facts. What I told you. Written down accurately. No interpretation. No spin. Nothing in it that you could use to make me need you. She looked at him. Everything in it is something you'd need to help me accurately. She pressed her lips together. I know the difference, she said. I do know it. It took a minute. It took a minute, she said. And that's not fair to you. But it's accurate about what I've been through. Cal said nothing. He didn't fill the space with reassurance. Reassurance right now would be the wrong thing. What she'd just said deserved to sit where it landed. You're not being unfair, he said finally. You're being accurate about what you've learned. That's different. She looked at the notebook for a moment. You talked to a lawyer for me, she said. You got background on him. You kept notes so you'd have the details right. And you did all of it without telling me in a way that made me feel like I owed you something. A pause. Without making it conditional, she shook her head slightly. No one has done that, she said. Not in a long time. Maybe not ever. Cal looked out the window, at the fields, at the garden. I wasn't performing anything, he said. I saw a situation that needed handling. I handled what I could, without your asking. Because I wasn't sure you would ask, he stopped. Then, you're not used to asking for help. No, she said quietly. I'm not. Neither am I, he said. So I understand the architecture of that. Something shifted in her face then. The smallest thing. Not quite a smile. The thing that comes before a smile, when a person isn't sure yet they have permission to let one happen. She picked up the notebook, set it back where it had been. Thank you, she said. The second time she'd said that since she arrived. The first had been in the entryway on day 1. Brief and formal and necessary. This one had weight in it. He nodded once. Scout came in from the living room and went to his water bowl. The sound of him drinking broke the moment clean. Which was exactly right. Some moments don't need to be extended beyond what they are. Lunch, Nora said, and turned to the stove. Cal sat down at the table. He put his hand briefly on the notebook, then moved it aside. Deanne came on a Thursday afternoon in early May. Cal was behind the barn when he heard a car on the dirt road. He came around the side and saw a dark blue sedan parked at the gate. Diane was standing beside it, looking at the farm, not at Cal. At the farm, at the garden beds, the rebuilt cold frame, the chicken coop. The evidence of attention in every direction she looked. She looked the way she always looked when she was processing something she hadn't expected. Still, inward, taking it in before she decided what to do with it. Cal walked over. Scout walked with him, not ahead. Beside, Diane heard them and turned, looked at Cal. Then at Scout. Scout stopped at Cal's left side and stayed there. He did not move toward Diane, did not acknowledge her particularly, just stood. She noticed. Her expression shifted slightly. Cal, Diane. She looked well. That was the honest assessment. The year in Missoula had agreed with her externally. Good clothes. Something settled in her posture that hadn't always been there, but she was carrying something behind the eyes. A weight that external arrangement couldn't cover. I should have called, she said. Probably. She looked at the garden again. Someone else is here. Yes, I saw She stopped. The garden looks different. Someone's been working it. Yes, she processed that. Cal waited. He wasn't going to help her get to whatever she'd come to say, is it? She stopped again. Then, never mind, the back door of the house opened. Nora came out onto the porch. She'd heard the car. She stood at the top of the steps and looked at them. Deanne looked at her. Nora looked at Diane. Neither of them spoke. 2 seconds, 3. Then Nora went back inside, quietly. No performance in either direction. Just a clear reading of the situation and the right response to it. Diane watched her go. She knew who I am, Diane said. She knew there was a photograph in the hallway, Cal said. She's seen it? That's still there? Yes. Something moved across Diane's face. He wasn't sure what to name it. The man I left you for, she said. Then stopped. Started again. He wasn't who I thought he was. Cal waited. I'm not asking to come back, she said, directly. No decoration. I know what I did. I know what it cost. I just wanted to say it out loud, that I was wrong. Not about everything, but about the most important things. He looked at her. She had always been direct when she was ready to say the real thing. That had been something he'd respected. When she was done circling, she said it plainly. I hear you, he said. I know you can't. I hear you, he said again. Not cutting her off, meaning it. She nodded, looked at the house one more time. At the porch where Nora had been standing. She's good for this place, Diane said. I can see that from here. Cal didn't respond to that. Are you happy? She asked. He turned the question over. Honestly, I'm better than I was, he said. She nodded. Like that was an acceptable answer. Like she was going to let it be enough. Take care of yourself, Cal. You too. She got back in the car. He stood and watched her drive back down the dirt road. The sound of the engine fading. The gate still open where she'd parked outside it. Swinging slightly in the afternoon wind. He went and closed it. Then he went inside. Nora was in the kitchen. 2 mugs already out. Coffee poured. She didn't look up immediately when he came in. He sat down. She set a mug in front of him. Sat down across with her own. He wrapped both hands around the mug. She came to say she was sorry, he said. Nora nodded. She didn't ask for anything. That's worth something, Nora said. It is. He looked up. First time she's done that, did it help? He thought about it. Actually thought about it. Yes, he said. I didn't know it would until it happened. But yes, Nora held her mug. Good, she said, simply, and meant it. They sat there for a while. The kitchen warm around them. Scout shifting in his spot near the stove. Outside the May afternoon light fell long and golden across the fields. Some afternoons don't require anything from you. They let it be that. Scout stopped eating properly on a Monday in late May. Not dramatically. He didn't refuse his bowl. He just slowed down. Took longer. Left a small amount at the bottom that he would have finished without hesitation 3 months ago. Nora noticed before Cal did. She didn't say anything right away. She watched for a day. 2 days. She sat near Scout in the evenings and placed her hand lightly on his hip. Watched how he breathed. Watched how he moved from his bed to the water bowl. Noted when he avoided the porch steps and went around instead. On the 3rd day, she said to Cal, he's been favoring his left side. For about a week. Watch how he gets up. Cal watched. She was right. He called Dr. Carol Tesch's office in Kalispell that afternoon. An appointment the following morning at 10. I'll come, Nora said when Cal told her. You don't have to. I know, she didn't add anything. Just got her jacket and her boots and was ready at 9:30. They drove the 18 miles with Scout in the back seat. The dog lay down as soon as they were moving. He didn't try to look out the window the way he used to on the rare occasions Cal took him in the truck. He just lay there. Quiet. Conserving something. That told Cal more than the limping had. Nora sat in the back with Scout. She didn't try to comfort him with words. She put her hand on his flank and left it there. Scout didn't move away from it. Cal watched in the rearview mirror for a moment. Then watched the road. Dr. Tesch was 60, short gray hair, the unhurried manner of someone who had been doing this for 30 years and had stopped needing to perform anything because she actually had it. She examined Scout thoroughly. X-rays, range of motion assessment, careful palpation of the hip joint, which Scout bore without complaint, but with a stillness that showed it cost him something. She sat with Cal after. Degenerative joint disease, she said. Hip dysplasia. He's probably had a mild form for years. The compensation patterns he developed to manage it have run out. The joint itself is now the primary issue. She folded her hands. He's not in crisis. But he's been in low-grade pain for a while. Probably longer than it's been visible. Cal absorbed that. How long has he been off his food? 3, 4 days, pain behavior. His way of communicating that something's wrong. A pause. He's a stoic dog. The fact that it showed up in his appetite means it's real, and it's not new. What do we do? Anti-inflammatories, diet adjustment. Warmth. He shouldn't be sleeping on cold floors. Limit the stairs. No running, no jumping. Gentle movement is beneficial. Keep him active but controlled. She looked at Cal directly. He can have good years ahead. But he needs management now. His body has been carrying his whole life's work. We help him carry it differently. She stood. How old was he when you got him? 11 months. And you've been together since? 7 years. She shook his hand. He's a good dog. Take care of him. Nora was in the waiting room with Scout when Cal came out. The dog was lying on the floor, his head on her knee. She was looking down at him with an expression Cal hadn't seen on her face before. Not the careful, measured expression she wore most of the time. Something underneath it. Something that had nothing to do with caution or calculation. Just simple, open care. She looked up. He told her what Dr. Tesh had said. She listened without interrupting. On the way out, Scout walked carefully. Not dramatically slow. Just with the measured consideration of someone who had learned to manage something that hurt. Nora held the rear door of the truck open for him. She guided him up with one hand under his chest, not rushing him. Letting him find his own pace. Scout let her. In the truck, he put his head back on her knee. She kept her hand on him. Cal drove. The road back was straight and flat. Fields on either side. Mountains to the west taking the afternoon light. He checked the mirror twice. The second time he left his eyes there a moment longer than necessary. Scout's gray muzzle on Nora's knee. Her hand steady on his side. The two of them in the back seat of his truck on a road in Montana, connected by something simple. Something that hadn't been arranged or decided. Something that had just happened. The way certain things happen when you stop managing the distance between yourself and something good. He'll be all right, Nora said from the back seat. I know a beat. How do you know? She asked. Cal thought about it. Because he's not done, he said. He doesn't stop until it's time. And it's not time. She didn't answer that. But her hand stayed on Scout all the way home. That night, Cal moved Scout's bed to the kitchen, close to the stove. He found an old wool blanket in the storage room and folded it double underneath the existing padding. He gave Scout the first anti-inflammatory dose wrapped in a piece of beef. Scout ate it without protest, without theater. Cal stood over him for a moment. 7 years. The deployment that didn't have a public name. The nights in places with bad geography and worse politics. The years on this farm. The way Scout had always just been there. The way a fixed point is there. Something you can find in the dark without searching. You don't say thank you to a dog. They don't receive it the way people do. But Cal put his hand on Scout's head and held it there. Scout sighed, the long releasing kind, and put his head down. Nora appeared in the doorway, her tea in hand. She looked at Scout's new setup. The bed, the stove proximity, the folded blanket. Good spot, she said quietly. He's not supposed to do stairs more than twice a day, Cal said. I'll sleep down here for a while. Keep an eye. She didn't tell him that was unnecessary. Didn't tell him he was being excessive. She just accepted it, the way she accepted most things about him. As a fact about the person in front of her. Not something to argue with or manage. I'll get up at 3, she said. Check on him. You sleep, Nora. You're not sleeping anyway, she said. At least one of us should. She went upstairs. Cal sat down on the floor, back against the cabinet near Scout's bed. Scout looked at him. That steady, evaluating look. Don't read into it, Cal said. Scout put his head down. At 3 in the morning, he heard her on the stairs, soft steps. The particular pattern of someone trying not to wake the house. She came into the kitchen without turning on the overhead light. Used the small under-cabinet lamp, just enough to see by. She checked Scout's water bowl, refilled it, ran her hand once along his flank. Scout's tail moved twice on the blanket. Didn't get up, she straightened. Looked at Cal sitting on the floor. For a moment they were both just there, the kitchen warm. The night outside large and cold and quiet. The stove ticking as it settled. She didn't say anything. She went back upstairs. Cal stayed where he was until the sky began to lighten. Outside, the first birds. The particular pre-dawn silence that is different from night silence. Thinner. Something in it that knows what's coming. Scout was breathing steady. Slow and even. Cal rested his head back against the cabinet. He thought about the notebook on the table. About what Nora had said. I know the difference. I just needed a minute. He thought about Grant Paley's business card in the dirt by the gate. He thought about Diane at the gate. She's good for this place. I can see it from here. He thought about his father's letter in the wooden box, the things that go unsent, the things that get folded up and kept and never reach the person they were meant for. He was not going to be that. He closed his eyes. He slept without meaning to. 4 hours. The most he'd managed in longer than he could accurately calculate. He didn't analyze it. He let it be what it was. Outside, the late May morning was coming up cold and clear over the Whitefish Range, and the gate at the end of the dirt road was closed, and the farm was quiet in the particular way that means something is being built. Not loudly, not with announcement, but steadily, the way good things are always built. Without asking permission, without making noise about it, one day at a time. June in Flathead Valley doesn't ask permission, it just arrives. Warm mornings that mean it. Long evenings that stretch past 9 o'clock and make the daylight feel like something being given back. The mountains losing the last of their snow at the upper elevations. The fields going from the pale green of early spring to something deeper. Something that has weight to it. Something that has decided to stay. Cal noticed it the way he noticed most things on this farm, not through a single moment of recognition. Through accumulation. One morning the light was different. One evening the air held warmth past dark. One afternoon he looked up from the equipment shed, and the whole valley was the color of something that had made up its mind. He didn't say anything about it, but he noticed. And something in him noticed that he was noticing, which was different from 2 years ago. 2 years ago he'd worked through June like it was February, like the season didn't have a claim on him. Like nothing outside the immediate task had any particular relevance. Now he stood at the kitchen window in the early morning and actually looked at the fields. That was something. Nora was canning. She'd found the equipment in the storage room during one of her systematic explorations of what the farm held and what it needed. Old canning jars, still good. Lids and bands, some still sealed in their original packaging. A large enamel pot that had belonged to Cal's mother, he thought, though he couldn't say for certain. She'd cleaned everything. Set it up on the counter with the same organized logic she applied to anything she was about to do seriously. And now the kitchen smelled like vinegar in summer and fruit that had reached the exact right moment, rows of jars cooling on the counter. Red, amber, deep purple. Birch Calder's heirloom tomatoes, Bev's variety, he'd said, packed into their jars and waiting to become the kind of thing that carries a summer through to February. Cal came in from the barn one afternoon and stood in the kitchen doorway and looked at those jars. He thought about what it took to make something last, the particular effort of it. The understanding that preservation is not passive, it's active. It requires heat and timing and the willingness to do the work now so that later you have something to reach for. He thought his father would have approved of those jars. He didn't say that out loud, but he thought it. He cooked dinner that night. This was unusual enough that Nora looked up when he came into the kitchen instead of her. "I cook," he said. "I know you cook, just not often," noted. He had venison in the freezer from a deer birch. Calder had given him at the start of winter. He had potatoes from Nora's garden, which had started producing in late May with a seriousness that suggested the soil had been waiting for exactly this kind of attention. He had garlic and rosemary and a cast iron pan that had been in this kitchen since before Cal was born. He cooked. She sat at the table with her planning notebook, working through the fall planting schedule. Neither of them performed anything. They just occupied the kitchen at the same time, doing different things, and somehow that was exactly right. The venison came out well. Better than he'd expected. "You undersell yourself," Nora said. "I don't cook often enough to have reliable results." "This is a reliable result." "Luck, it's not luck," she said. "It's knowing when to stop touching it." Considered that. It was accurate. They ate. Scout lay between their chairs. Outside, the June evening took its time turning dark. Neither of them filled the silence. It didn't need filling. This was new. Not the silence. Cal had always been comfortable with silence, but comfortable silence with another person in it, that was different. That was something he hadn't had in a long time, maybe longer than 2 years. Maybe longer than Diane. Maybe he'd been carrying a version of that specific loneliness. For so long he'd mistaken it for his personality. He didn't say that out loud either. But the thought landed and stayed. The white truck came back on a Tuesday, 11 at night. The beginning of June, Cal was in the living room. Not trying to sleep, he'd stopped pretending to try. He sat in the chair by the window with a book he wasn't reading, the way he did most evenings after 10. Scout was on the floor beside him. The house was settled and quiet. Scout's head came up first, not alarmed. Not the alarm posture, something more specific. The posture of something registered, assessed. Filed as significant, Cal set the book down before Scout was fully upright. He went to the window, headlights at the far end of the dirt road, moving slowly. Too slowly for someone who'd taken a wrong turn. Too slowly for someone who was lost and looking for a number on a mailbox. This was the exact pace of someone reading a property, taking it in. Deciding something, the headlights stopped at the gate. For a moment, nothing moved. Then the driver's door opened. Grant Paley got out. He stood outside the gate in the dark and looked at the house. Not at the gate, not at the road. At the house, the lights in the living room window, the shape of the barn behind, the garden beds that were visible even at night, the way ordered things hold their geometry in the dark. He didn't rattle the gate, didn't call out, didn't make any move that could be characterized as threatening or even inappropriate, just stood there, looking at the property the way you look at something you've decided belongs to you. Patient, still. The look of a man who is not surprised to find the thing where he expected it, who has simply come to confirm the location before deciding the next step. Cal's jaw set. He turned from the window, moved to the hallway. Nora's door was open. She was sitting up in bed, small lamp on. She'd heard the engine. She was already awake, already sitting up, already watching the doorway. She looked at Cal. He looked at her. She was dressed, not in pajamas, in her day clothes, jeans, work boots, canvas jacket folded on the chair beside her. She'd been expecting this, not tonight specifically, but some night. She'd been expecting some night like this night since before she walked through his gate. "I'm not standing behind you," she said, before he could say anything. "Quiet. Clear, Nora. I'm not doing that anymore." Her voice was steady, the particular steadiness of a decision already made, not from him, not ever again. Cal looked at her. 1 second, 2. Then he nodded. Once they went downstairs together, Scout was already free at front door. Not pacing, not growling. Just positioned, alert and still and ready to be whatever the moment required. Cal opened the door. The June night came in cool and wide. Stars across the whole sky. The fields dark on either side. The long dirt road running straight to the gate where Grant Paley still stood. Still watching, still patient. In no hurry at all, because patience was his primary weapon. Patience and the appearance of reasonableness. Patience and the carefully maintained image of a man who had done nothing wrong, who was simply here, who simply wanted to talk. Cal walked down off the porch, across the yard. To the gate, Nora came with him. Not behind, beside. 1 step to his right. Her arms loose at her sides, her chin level. Her face showing nothing except presence. Scout walked at Cal's left. They stopped at the gate from the inside. The 3 of them, facing Grant Paley through the iron bars. Grant looked at Cal, then at Nora. Something moved in his face, a micro-adjustment. The recalculation of a man who had expected a different arrangement. He recovered in under a second. "I know it's late," he said. "Easy. Practiced. I apologize for that." He looked at Nora. "I just need 10 minutes, that's all." 10 minutes and I'll go," Cal said. "She doesn't want 10 minutes with you. She can tell me that herself. She already told you." Cal's voice was level. Not loud, not heated. Just matter of fact. The way you state a thing that has already been established. At this gate. 3 weeks ago. The answer was no then. Grant looked past Cal to Nora, and his voice changed, subtly. The way it always changed when it was meant specifically for her. Something warmer, something that sounded like intimacy but was actually precision, Nora. Just her name. Like the name itself was an argument. "I'm not angry, I just want to talk. You know me." "You know I'm not," Grant her voice. Cutting across his before he could finish. He stopped. She looked at him through the iron bars, 10 feet of dark air and a gate between them. And she was not afraid. Or she was afraid. Probably she was afraid, Cal thought. She'd be foolish not to be. She had taken the fear and stood it in the corner where it couldn't interfere with what she was doing. "Grant," she said again, steady. Final. No one word, without decoration, without explanation. Without the softening she might have added once, to manage his reaction, to cushion the no inside, something that felt less like a door closing. Just. No. Grant was quiet, the practiced expression held, but something underneath it didn't. Something in the eyes. Something small and fast that he managed before it became visible, but not quite fast enough. Cal reached into his back pocket. He'd put Vera Still's card there before he came outside. He held it through the gate bars. "Any legal matter goes through Vera Stills in Kalispell," Cal said. "Her number, business hours." Monday through Friday. Grant looked at the card. The calculation was visible. Not in his face, in the pause, in the quality of the stillness. He was running numbers, assessing exposure, deciding what the cost-benefit looked like. He took the card. "I think you might not understand what you're involved in here," Grant said quietly. To Cal. The pleasantness gone now. Not replaced with anger. Replaced with something colder. The thing underneath the pleasantness, when the pleasantness is no longer useful. 3 weeks of knowing someone isn't the same as 3 years. "You're right," Cal said. "It's not the same." He held Grant's eyes. 3 weeks of watching someone be who they actually are. Without the architecture. He paused. "That's different from 3 years of watching someone manage a structure you built around them." Grant looked at him for 3 full seconds. Then he walked back to his truck. No rush, controlled. The same unhurried pace he'd arrived at. He got in, closed the door carefully, not slammed, precisely closed. The way you close a door when you want the other person to understand that you are still in complete control of yourself. That none of this has reached you. That you are the same person who got out of this truck, and you will be that person driving away from it. Except the card was in his hand. And Vera Still's name was on it. And that meant the walls had started going up. And walls cost something to go through. He turned the truck around. Drove back down the dirt road at the same deliberate pace. The taillights getting smaller, then gone. The sound of the engine fading into the Montana night. Cal stood at the gate until it was fully gone. Then he turned. Nora was still standing where she'd been. Scout leaning slightly against her leg. Her hands at her sides, her face not triumph, not relief. Something deeper than either. The expression of a person standing on the correct side of a line they just drew in real time. Cal walked back to her. "He'll file something," she said, through an attorney. Official. "He'll make it as organized and inconvenient as possible, yes. And Vera will cost him more than he's used to paying," Cal said. "She'll make the record public. The 2021 complaint, the police contacts, the pattern. His attorney won't enjoy any of that." Nora looked at the road. Empty and dark. Ordinary now, as if nothing had happened there. "He closed the door carefully," she said. "I noticed. He always does that," she said. "Everything measured. Everything controlled. Even when he's angry. Especially then." A pause. "I used to think that meant I was the problem, that I was the uncontrolled one, because he was always so." She stopped. "Calm." "That's how it's designed," Cal said. She looked at him. "I know that now," she said. "I've known it for a while. Knowing it and feeling it stop working on you are different things." Scout pressed his head against her leg. She put her hand on him. They stood on the porch for a while, the night around them wide and cold. Even June nights in Montana stayed cool, the kind of cold that reminds you the mountains are right there, that they don't care what month it is. "You should sleep," Cal said. "So should you," she said. He almost said, I don't sleep well." He'd said that before. Multiple times. It was true, and it was also a wall, a small one. But a wall instead. He said, "I'll try." She looked at him. Something in that registered. "Something small, good," she said, and went inside. He stood on the porch a few more minutes, Scout beside him. The gate at the end of the road closed. He hadn't moved it. He went inside, checked all the locks. Deliberate, every door, every window. The deadbolt, the chain, the back latch, not from habit but from decision. Then he went to bed. He slept 5 hours straight. The most he'd managed in longer than he could accurately calculate. He didn't analyze it. He let it be what it was. 3 days later, Vera Stills called. Cal was in the equipment shed. He stepped outside to take it. "Grant's attorney made contact this morning," Vera said. "No preamble. She never used preamble. They're filing formally on the lease and the bookkeeping documentation. Civil claims, low threshold, but it puts something on paper." "All right," I responded this afternoon. "Cease and desist documentation. Civil harassment filing. A formal letter noting 3 years of financial records that Nora processed herself. The pattern of control documented in her own testimony, and the existence of the 2021 civil complaint." A pause. "I also made a phone call to a colleague in Billings who works with domestic civil cases. She's been aware of Grant's Paley for some time." Cal was quiet. "His attorney called back within 2 hours," Vera said. "They want to discuss terms." "What kind of terms?" "The kind that cost him less than proceeding." She paused. "I told them there were no terms. There was a record, and the record was growing." Another pause. "His attorney did not enjoy that. Good. Give it a few days," Vera said. "And Cal, take care of her. Not clinically, like a person. Yes, he said. He hung up. He found Nora in the garden. She was working the north bed, head down, focused. The particular focus of someone who is keeping their hands busy because their mind is working on something else. He told her. She kept her hands in the soil while he talked. Like she needed something solid underneath while she took it in. When he finished, she was quiet. Turned the soil once with her hand. Slow. It's not over, she said. No. But he's working from a worse position now than he was a week ago. She looked at the bed. At the dark-turned earth. At the place where Birch Calder's tomato seeds were already showing their first green. I never thought I'd have a record, she said. Something written down. Something that says, this is what happened. This is what it was. Now you do. She pressed her lips together. When I left, she said. I thought I was just running. Just getting out with what I could carry. I didn't have a plan for what came after. She turned the soil again. I just needed to get somewhere I could breathe. Cal crouched down at the edge of the bed. Not helping. Just nearby, you got there, he said. She looked at him. Something simple in her face. No performance, just a fact being confirmed. I did, she said. Scout came over from the shade at the edge of the barn and lay down at the corner of the garden bed, between them, his chin on the earth, eyes half closed in the June warmth. The three of them stayed like that for a while, the sun on the garden, the soil dark and ready, the mountains steady in the west, the gate at the end of the road closed. Vera called again 8 days later. His attorney withdrew, she said. All of it. The lease claim, the bookkeeping dispute, every piece of paper they filed. Cal was at the kitchen table. Nora was upstairs. He could hear her moving around. Nothing in exchange? Nothing. They withdrew, clean. A pause. I've dealt with attorneys like his before. Once the risk is public and the cost starts compounding, a smart businessman does the math. Grant Paley is, whatever else he is, a smart businessman. You think he's done? I think he's done with this approach, Vera said carefully. I won't promise you more than that. People like him don't always make permanent decisions all at once. But this avenue is closed. And he knows the next avenue will cost him more. That matters to people like him. A pause. You did the right things in the right order. So did she. Take care of yourselves. He hung up, he went upstairs, knocked on the open door. Nora was at the small desk under the window. The planning notebook open. The September planting schedule half finished. She looked up. He told her. She turned back to the window. Looked out at the fields. The garden. The long view south to the tree line, quiet, a long quiet. I thought when I heard this news, she said finally, I'd feel different. Different, how like winning something. She shook her head slightly. But it just feels quiet. Is that bad? She thought about it. Actually thought. No, she said. Quiet is what I was trying to get to. She turned from the window, looked at Cal. I've been running or bracing for something for 3 years. The last 3 months is the longest stretch I've gone without that. How does it feel? She looked at him. A real look. The kind that doesn't have anything held back behind it. Like standing on solid ground, she said. Like I forgot what that felt like. A pause. And now I remember. He looked at her. He thought about the gate. About Scout stepping back to make room. About a woman who'd walked 4 miles in worn-out shoes and made an offer instead of a plea and hadn't looked away since. He thought about what gets built when 2 people who have both lost things decide. Not dramatically, not with announcement. To stop managing the distance between themselves and something real. He thought about his father's letter. The things that go unsent. He was not going to be that. The box came out again on a Tuesday night in late July, rain on the roof. The particular sound of Montana rain when it decides to mean it, steady and total, making the outside irrelevant and the inside very specific. Cal had been reading, or not reading, holding a book. He got up, went to the storage room, found the wooden box where Nora had put it back after the first time, on the shelf, not buried away, on the shelf where it could be reached. He brought it to the kitchen table, sat down, opened the clasp, the photograph first. His parents on that road trip. His father looking at his mother instead of the road. Both of them in it completely, neither of them knowing he was watching. Because he wasn't, yet. Because Cal wouldn't exist for another 6 years after this photo. But his father already knew how to look at someone that way. Already knew how to be fully present in a moment that mattered. He just hadn't known how to put it into words in real time, so he'd written it down. Carefully. In private, and kept it. Cal unfolded the letter. And this time he read it all the way through. It took a while. The letter was long. His father wrote the way he did everything, thorough, precise, without waste. No sentence was there by accident. Every paragraph had done its work before moving to the next. He wrote about loving Cal's mother the way you love a place you've lived, so long you forget to look at it. And then one day you look, and it's everything. It's the whole thing. And you realize you've been in it all this time without knowing how to say, This is what I mean. You are the reason I can stand in any room and feel like I belong somewhere. He wrote about being afraid that saying it out loud would make it smaller, that some things were too large for words, and the words would only reduce them. He wrote about deciding to put it down on paper instead, just to have said it somewhere, even if only to himself. He wrote, I should have said this to her face, I know that. But I've never known how to make my mouth do what my chest is doing, so this is the closest I know how to get. Cal set the letter down, sat for a long time, the rain on the roof, the stove ticking, Scout breathing slow, and even in his bed near the warmth, his father had loved his mother fully, completely, and had written it down in private and kept it in a box and never sent it, because the words felt too small, because saying it out loud seemed like it might diminish it, because some people learn to keep the largest things inside where they can't be reduced or misunderstood or returned. Cal understood that reasoning. He had lived by a version of it for most of his adult life. He also understood, sitting at this table in this rain, that his father had been wrong, not about loving. He'd had that right, about the keeping. The keeping was the mistake, the folding it up and putting it away, the assuming that because it was real inside, it was somehow reaching the person it was meant for. It doesn't work that way. Cal knew that now. He'd learned it slowly and at considerable cost. Presence matters. Work matters. Showing up matters. But a letter without an address doesn't reach anyone. He folded the letter. Set it back in the box. Set the photograph on top. Closed the clasp. He sat at the table a few more minutes, listening to the rain, looking at the box. Then he looked at the ceiling, at the room above it where Nora was. He was not going to put this in a box. The next evening, the rain still coming and going in patches, Nora was at the sink washing the dinner dishes. Cal was drying. This had become the arrangement. Not because anyone assigned it, just because it was what happened, the way most things between them happened. Without being decided, without being named, the kitchen smelled like the venison they'd had, and the rosemary, and faintly, underneath, the vinegar of Nora's canning from earlier in the week. Cal set a plate on the rack, picked up a bowl, looked at the counter in front of him. Nora, she kept her hands in the water. I want you to stay. Her hands stopped moving, but she didn't turn around yet. Not because the farm needs you. He set the bowl down, not because Scout chose you, even though he did. And he doesn't choose lightly, and I've never known him to be wrong. A pause. Because I want you here. Because this house is different with you in it. Because I don't want it to go back to what it was before you walked through that gate. And I've been thinking it for long enough that not saying it out loud is starting to feel like a choice I'm making. And I'm not willing to keep making it. Nora turned off the tap. She stood there a moment, hands at the edge of the sink, not turning yet. Not because she was hesitating, because she was deciding how to say what she'd already decided. She turned around and she looked at him, a real look. The kind that takes everything in at once and doesn't deflect. I've been careful, she said, since I got here. Very careful not to mistake shelter for something else, not to build something in my head that would be easier than dealing with what I came from. That's good. But, she stopped. I know the difference now, between something that's real and something that's been constructed to feel real. I've seen what the constructed version looks like, up close. I know every technique, every angle. She held his eyes. This isn't that. Something in Cal's chest. Quiet and solid and not going anywhere. Okay, he said. She almost smiled. Not quite. But almost okay. She said back, he'd said it before, that word, when something had settled. When something was true and acknowledged and didn't need more words around it. She'd noticed that about him months ago. Now she said it back in the same way, with the same weight, the same finality, a word that meant received. Understood. This is real, and we both know it, and we don't need to keep talking about it. Scout raised his head from his bed, looked at both of them with the quiet, complete attention he gave to things that mattered. Then put his head back down. The rain tapped against the window. Easy now. Almost done. Neither of them moved toward the other. Neither of them needed to. They were already exactly where they were, in the warm kitchen that smelled like rosemary in summer, in the house that had been empty for 2 years and wasn't anymore. The named thing sat between them, real and solid. Not going anywhere. That was enough. For now, that was everything. September arrived the way good months do, without asking permission. Without making promises it couldn't keep, the light in Flathead Valley in September is different from every other month. Longer shadows. The gold coming into the hills at an angle that doesn't happen in summer. Something in the air that isn't cold yet, but has stopped being warm. A feeling that isn't ending. More like completion. More like a thing that has found its shape. Cal was up before the sun. He always was. That hadn't changed. It wasn't going to change. Some things about a person are just what they are. And he'd stopped apologizing for it internally somewhere around the middle of August, when it became clear that Nora was also up before 6 most mornings. For her own reasons, in her own way. He came downstairs in the dark. Started the coffee. Stood at the kitchen window and looked at the fields in the last of the night. The garden behind the house was in its late-season abundance. The tomatoes done. Finished weeks ago, the plants pulled and composted back into the beds where they'd grown. The beans still going. The squash sprawled past its allotted space into the grass, beyond the edging in the way squash always does, as if it simply refuses to acknowledge the concept of a boundary. Birch Calder's heirloom tomatoes were already in the canning jars on the pantry shelf. 12 jars, red and deep and real. Something that would be there in February, when February needed reminding that summer had happened. Cal heard her on the stairs. The particular sound of her. The weight of her step. The third stair from the bottom that creaked in a way it hadn't before she arrived. Or maybe it had, and he'd stopped noticing it because there was no one to hear it. She came into the kitchen. Hair not yet arranged, feet in the old wool socks she'd found in the storage room months ago and claimed without asking, which he had never minded and had in fact been quietly glad about in a way he hadn't examined closely. She went to the counter, poured herself a cup from the pot he'd made, came, and stood beside him at the window. They looked at the fields together. The light was beginning to come up over the Whitefish Range to the east. Not the light itself yet, the announcement of it. The sky above the mountains starting to separate from the darkness. One shade of dark from another. And then, slowly, the first pale suggestion of something, the back door pushed open, Scout. He moved with the measured care of someone who had learned to manage what hurt without making theater of it. Deliberately. Head up. Out into the September morning and across the yard and into the garden, his usual route, his usual circuit. He was slower than he'd been in spring. There was no pretending otherwise. The mornings showed it most. Before the medication took full effect. Before the day's movement had warmed the joint enough to give him range. He moved with awareness of himself in a way he hadn't before the diagnosis. But he moved. Every morning he moved. He checked the fence line at the east edge of the garden. He investigated the place under the squash where something small had been digging. He walked the south perimeter where the marigolds had gone to seed. Nora's marigolds, the aphid deterrent, Birch Calder's wife's method passed through Nebraska women across generations, and now planted in this specific corner of Montana for this specific season. He did what he always did. Every morning. He checked the borders of the world he'd decided to protect, slower, but present. And still, in some way Cal couldn't have explained to anyone who hadn't spent years watching it. Entirely himself. Cal watched him. The gray muzzle. The deliberate pace. 7 years. The places they'd been. The things they'd done. The long count of mornings on this farm. Scout the most reliable constant in a life that had otherwise done a lot of shifting. He thought, you don't stop until it's time. And it's not time yet. Nora's hand came to rest on the counter beside his, not touching. Just close. He looked at her. She was still watching Scout in the garden. Her face in the early light, the early September light, the soft kind, the kind that doesn't demand anything from you. Had a quality he'd been storing without realizing he was storing it. The way you store things that matter before you understand that they matter. Nora. She turned, thank you. She looked at him. Not for the garden. Not for the cooking. Not for any of the practical, real, visible things she'd brought with her when she walked through the gate with a backpack and a canvas tote and worn-out shoes and an offer instead of a plea. For the other thing. The thing underneath all of it, for walking down a dirt road to a gate she'd never seen, and deciding it was worth finding out what was on the other side. For staying when she could have left. For standing in the kitchen and doing dishes, and sitting on the porch and saying no at the gate with her voice clear and final, and finding out slowly, carefully, over the whole length of 6 months, what it felt like to be somewhere real. For making this house smell like someone lived in it, for making him notice June. She knew what he meant. He could see that she knew. She didn't pretend she didn't. "Thank you," she said. Her own thank you, not the same one. Her own, for her own reasons. The ones he could guess at, and the ones he couldn't, and all the ones in between that lived in the accumulated months of early mornings and quiet evenings, and the kind of daily proximity that either wears people down or builds something neither of them had words for yet. He nodded once. She turned back to the window. Outside Scout finished his circuit of the garden and stopped at the south edge near the marigold seed heads. He stood there a moment, looking at whatever it is dogs look at when they go still. Then he lay down in the early light, in the last warmth of the September sun, just beginning to clear the mountains, and put his chin on his paws. Not tired. Done. The way you're done when the work is complete and the territory is confirmed, and everything that needed checking has been checked and found to be as it should be. The fields ran south to the tree line, north to where Birch Calder's fence wire held. The barn behind the house, solid and leaning slightly, the way the barn had always been, the white house with the covered porch that needed repainting, the photograph in the hallway, still there. A record of something that had been real, honest, the frame with the cracked corner that a shop in Kalispell could fix, if anyone decided to take it in. The gate at the end of the dirt road, closed, the way it had been closed every night since the end of March, when a woman had walked 4 miles down a county road and stood at a fence and made an offer instead of a plea, and a German shepherd had decided not to sound the alarm, and a man who had been alone long enough to forget what company felt like had opened it. Inside the kitchen now. 2 mugs. 2 people standing at a window watching a dog move through a garden in the early light. A house that smelled like coffee and canning and rosemary, like someone lived in it, like more than one someone. Some things don't announce themselves. They just become true while you're standing there. And then one morning you look up and realize the gate has been closed for months, and the fields are the color of September, and the dog is doing his rounds, and the person beside you is drinking their coffee and watching the mountains. And you don't need to name it. You already know what it is, and it isn't going anywhere.